Hello and welcome to this episode of Kennedy Saves the World. I stumbled across a disturbing article in the Daily Mail about Justin Bieber's 6-year-old sister. And you're like, Justin Bieber has a 6-year-old sister? Well, he does, and you would know that if you were on Instagram and you followed her like 357,000 other people. So what's disturbing about this is her name is Bay, and she's a cute kid, and her father, Jeremy Bieber, who is a total narcissistic blowhard. And whatever problems Justin Bieber has, I blame his parents, but I specifically blame his dad because his dad has always been one of those yucky hangers on who has to be a part of his son's fame and really has to be front and center because he wants to be a bro and he wants to be the one that everyone writes about and talks about. And, it's so much stolen valor. And from a parent, it's really disgusting. So this sweet little kid, they post pictures of her in bikinis and in cheerleading poses. And again, she's 6. And, of course, there are teenagers and younger girls and their moms who watch this stuff. And, she's like a kid influencer. But there are also dudes who talk sexually openly about her in the comments. And it is so vile and so disgusting. And they do it with impunity. And Facebook, because Facebook Meta owns Instagram, they're allowing this. And it is so fucking disgusting because you look at Justin Bieber and you look at the reaction he's had since Diddy was arrested. And now, Diddy is the subject of dozens of lawsuits from people, including, there's one lawyer who's representing several minors. And, you're talking about kids as young as 9 potentially having been sexually assaulted by Diddy, male and female. And it's disturbing and gross. And then, you start to piece together some of the history between Usher and Diddy when Usher was still a teenager and Justin Bieber and Usher. Usher discovered Justin Bieber and then, sent Justin Bieber to Diddy camp, whatever that is. And, Justin Bieber was clearly disturbed by what happened. We don't know the contents of that. We don't know if there's video evidence of some sort of sexual assault, but, one can assume based on the allegations that for Justin Bieber, it wasn't good. And also his parents weren't there. His parents weren't protecting him. It reminded me of the Michael Jackson documentary where, these kids were talking about being groomed by Michael Jackson, and the parents were talking about how he was grooming the parents. And, you sort of go, where the hell were these people when their children were put in this position? So you would think that Justin Bieber's parents would have learned something about his experience and his, the guy was clearly traumatized. Something definitely happened, and it's not just the garden variety hideous trappings of fame that scramble someone's brains. I talked about that last week when discussing Liam Payne from One Direction, who it appears took his own life in Argentina. But, Justin Bieber, you throw in potential sexual abuse, and I don't see how someone that famous ever reconciles that trauma and the shame and everything else that comes with it. And I do blame his parents for not being more protective. I do blame his parents for not accompanying him everywhere and stepping in and making sure that predators didn't get to their child. But then if you go on to have more children as they have done, you're not protecting them. You're leaving her out there like bait for pedophiles to ogle over and sexualize. It is so incredibly disturbing, but it follows a trend. When you look at Diddy, look what happened with Michael Jackson. Look at these minors, these potential minor victims who are alleging hideous stuff at the hands of Sean Combs.
Don't go anywhere. More Kennedy Saves the World right after this.
And then we're hearing about the Abercrombie & Fitch CEO, Mike Jeffries, who apparently over a number of years, according to federal investigators, was taking young models, some of them in their teens, and moving them across state lines and raping them and having, a prostitution enterprise with these guys who were just hoping to be famous. And they were too scared to say no. Same thing with Harvey Weinstein, who was just diagnosed with a rare bone marrow cancer, who will probably die soon. And I don't think anyone's going to shed a tear over that. But, these guys with money and power and access who intimidate these young victims into silence, and now it's coming back to bite them in the ass. So having known that and having known this environment, why aren't more people doing something to protect children in this moment and the post-Me Too era, knowing what we know about successful, rich, and famous men who can get whatever they want, whenever they want it, the Jeffrey Epsteins of the world, who see young victims as being completely disposable. They don't care about their long-term trauma. And, the idea that there are people out there who don't do more to protect their kids, it's really sad, and there are those of us I always have issue with people who put their kids on social media, famous people who put their kids on social media in bikinis and overly sexualize them. I think there's something weird about it. I think if there's something weird about Heidi Klum and her daughter Lenny posing side by side in lingerie. I know the kid's legal and I know they're German and Germans are super weird about nudity as it is. But when the over-sexualization turns into sexual assault, we should all have a problem with that. And that's something that victims advocates have been saying throughout the entire explosion of illegal immigration, because, there are a lot of people who've been worried about unaccompanied minors. Because what do you think happens to them? It's what happens to every other vulnerable child. They are bait for predators. And so now you're seeing, and I've seen reporting from some of these victims advocacy groups, that they're doing the very best they can to police online sex sites, which the advertising for, younger prostitutes is up by 90%. And these kids are being trafficked. I'm not talking about adults. I'm not talking about adult sex workers who make a choice to go into a profession and have consensual sex with someone who wants to pay for it. That is a totally different category of people. I'm talking about people who are vulnerable and abused and who are trafficked in these various systems. And part of that is happening because of the influx at the southern border, because they're saying that, the uptick in these kids who are being advertised on sex sites are illegal immigrant children. Do you not care about them? Do you not care about them because they come from faraway places, because they don't speak English, because they're not legal citizens? Well, you absolutely should. So anyone who's trying to take the moral high ground here, you have ceded it if you're not doing whatever you can to protect these children. And that includes people like Jeremy Bieber, who should be ashamed of himself, because that's how it starts. And then we normalize this behavior, so we're no longer shocked by it. And now we're being absolutely bombarded. And, as a mom and as a normal human being, it just has to stop. So we have to talk about it. You have to be made aware of it. And, we all have to think about the choices that we make. So we will be better prepared to protect kids from these hellish devils that are running around preying upon them. Isn't that fun? This has been Kennedy Saves the World. I know it's a heavy topic, but you deserve it. I'm Kennedy.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app. Oh, go ahead and leave me a review while you're there. I'd love to hear what you have to say. You've been listening to Kennedy Saves the World on the Fox News Podcast Network.